Snow clung to the branches like it had nowhere better to be, and the Carter house looked exactly as it had every winter since I was a kid. Warm lights in the windows, a wreath on the door that was probably older than me, and my mother's voice drifting out with the scent of cinnamon and roast ham. I parked my rental at the end of the shoveled drive and sat for a second, watching my breath fog the windshield. Coming home always felt like opening a familiar book. Same characters, different page. Ethan, my mother Claire, called out before I'd even shut the door. She wrapped me in a hug that smelled like cloves and hand lotion. Her eyes scanned my face like she was checking for damage. "You look tired." I didn't respond, just smiled and stepped inside. Grandpa Walter sat in his recliner, watching the news with the sound low. He looked smaller than I remembered, more sunken in, but his voice still carried. "You're late," he said, not looking away from the screen. I wasn't. He just needed something to say. Uncle Dean appeared from the kitchen with a beer and a smirk. "Look what the snow dragged in," he said, clapping me on the back. His teenage sons Matt and Josh barely looked up from their phones. The house was festive but tense. Decorations everywhere, fire crackling, carols humming through the speakers. But underneath it all was something tight and coiled. I felt it in the way my mother kept glancing my way when she thought I wasn't looking. Her eyes held something behind them, nervous, unreadable. She poured wine for everyone but barely touched hers. Dean was louder than usual. Walter more silent. I watched the way they avoided certain topics, like someone had drawn invisible lines around conversations. After dinner, I sat in the den, watching the tree lights blink in slow rhythm. Claire hovered nearby, pretending to tidy up. "Did the drive go okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "No traffic." She nodded, but didn't leave, like she wanted to say more and couldn't find the words. I thought maybe she was just tired, or maybe something else entirely. Either way, I didn't push. I never do. I woke up to the soft thud of snow sliding off the roof and the smell of coffee drifting up the stairs. Christmas morning. The house was quiet. No kids shrieking over presents, no chaos. Just the creak of floorboards and the distant rattle of pans in the kitchen. I stretched, pulled on a sweater, and walked down to the living room, where stockings still hung above the fireplace like they had every year since I was 10. Mine was the last one on the right. Same red felt, same crooked stitching from when I tried to sew my name into it. Something was tucked at the bottom. I reached in, expecting maybe a gift card or some socks, but pulled out an envelope instead. No return address, just my name, handwritten. On the back, "You deserve to know the truth." I stood there for a long moment, envelope in hand, heart ticking louder than the old grandfather clock in the hallway. The paper was thick, heavier than usual. I ran my thumb along the flap, felt the weight of whatever was inside. My mom walked in then, holding a tray of cinnamon rolls. She stopped when she saw me. Her eyes flicked to the envelope, then to my face. "Merry Christmas," she said too softly. I nodded, slid the envelope into my hoodie pocket. The morning moved in slow motion after that. Dean told the same joke he always did about fruitcake being a hate crime. The cousins opened gift cards with feigned excitement. Walter said grace with a trembling hand. But my mind stayed on that envelope like it was burning a hole through my chest. Claire didn't bring it up, but she kept watching me. Small glances over the rim of her coffee mug, her fingers tapping restlessly on the arm of her chair. I didn't open it. Not yet. Not with everyone around. Whatever truth waited inside didn't belong to the noise of wrapping paper and Christmas music. It needed silence. Distance. I told myself I'd read it later. When I was alone. When I was ready. But the truth doesn't wait for permission. And part of me already knew whatever was in that letter was going to change everything. The hours moved like honey slow. Sticky, clinging to everything. Outside, snow kept falling in soft sheets, blanketing the driveway, the mailbox, the silence inside the house. I helped shovel the walk with Dean just to keep my hands busy. He talked about the plumbing in his rental property, something about frozen pipes and tenant complaints, but I wasn't listening. I kept thinking about the envelope tucked in my suitcase upstairs. Every time I thought about opening it, my stomach tightened like a fist. Claire hovered most of the day. In the kitchen, by the tree, even outside while I salted the steps. She didn't ask about the letter directly, but her eyes did. They followed me. Paused on me too long when I wasn't looking. She kept starting sentences and abandoning them halfway through. I meant, don't ever mind. Did I tell you actually? It's not important. At one point, she knocked on my bedroom door while I was pretending to nap, then said through the wood, "Just checking if you needed an extra blanket." Her voice was thin, unsure. I didn't answer. Walter stayed in his chair, as always, a folded newspaper on his lap but never turning the page. The TV was on but muted. He watched the fire instead. Occasionally his eyes would flick to me, then back to the flames. No questions, no comments, just that same heavy stillness. He didn't join the card game Dean and the boys started in the afternoon. Didn't grumble when the dog barked at the delivery guy. It was like he was bracing for something, or waiting. By mid-afternoon, I started to feel like I was the only person in the house, not in on some secret. Every interaction felt loaded, like stepping into a conversation that had been paused the moment I walked into the room. I caught Matt whispering something to Josh that made both of them glance at me, then look away. Dean was quieter now, more watchful. The warmth of the house didn't feel comforting anymore. It felt like insulation, something meant to keep the outside world out, while the inside unraveled slowly. I thought about the envelope again, about the handwriting, the weight, the words on the back. You deserve to know the truth. I wasn't sure if that was a promise or a threat. Christmas dinner was always the main event. Table stretched with folding leaves, chairs mismatched from the basement, good plates brought up from storage. Claire lit candles even though it was barely 5 p.m., and the roast filled the house with the kind of warmth you could almost forgive things inside. Almost. We passed dishes like everything was fine: green beans, mashed potatoes, rolls too hot to touch. Dean made a joke about the turkey being dry, and Claire swatted his arm, laughing too hard. Walter barely touched his food. The cousins scrolled their phones between bites. I tried to focus on chewing, swallowing, nodding, but I could feel the tension building, quietly, like pressure behind a sealed door. Halfway through dinner, Claire put down her fork, folded her hands. "Ethan," she said too softly. The table didn't go quiet all at once, but it did within seconds. Her voice had that effect. She looked across the table at me, face pale, and eyes unsure. "Did you open the letter?" The air left the room, just slipped out the windows and under the door, gone before I could catch my breath. I froze, fork still in my hand. Everyone was looking now. Dean blinked. Josh stopped mid-sip. Even the dog lifted its head. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Before I could even begin to form a lie or a question or anything at all, Grandpa Walter cleared his throat. It was the kind of sound that made people look up, even after years of learning not to. He set his napkin down slowly, deliberately. "I think it's time," he said. Claire's head dropped like something inside her gave out. Dean shifted in his seat, uncomfortable in a way I hadn't seen before. No one else said a word. I looked around the table and realized I was at the center of something that had been building for years. I wasn't a guest at this meal. I was the main course. I pushed my chair back. Slowly, carefully. My heart was pounding now, not in panic, but with the sharp rhythm of inevitability. I didn't say a word. Just stood, walked away from the table, and climbed the stairs toward the envelope still waiting in my suitcase. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, suitcase open, the envelope resting on top like it had floated there of its own will. The sounds of dinner still echoed faintly downstairs, forks scraping plates, a forced laugh, the clink of glasses, but they felt miles away. I held the envelope in both hands for a moment, staring at my name written in slanted, careful penmanship. Then I tore it open. The letter was short, 2 pages, single-spaced, typed, but signed in ink at the bottom. The words were precise, not emotional. Like someone had rehearsed this truth too many times to let it come out messy. It started with my birth, with how everyone celebrated, how Grandpa Walter passed out cigars at the hardware store. And then, in the second paragraph, it shattered everything. Dean is your biological father. I read it again, and again. My stomach felt like it had dropped straight through the floor. I scanned the rest of the page, hoping it was some kind of metaphor, a bad joke. But it wasn't. Claire had been 19, Dean 22. A single night. She didn't even remember most of it. Their parents, Walter and my grandmother, had been fighting for weeks. Grandma had a stroke the day after. And everything changed. They buried her. And with her, the mistake. When my mother realized she was pregnant, Walter insisted they cover it, told her it would ruin the family, that she had to lie for her own good. They built the story, the boyfriend from college, who left, the single mother narrative, and eventually, the man I'd grown up thinking was just my uncle became part of the furniture of my life. Always nearby, never close. Dean knew. Claire knew. Walter made sure no one else did, including me. I dropped the letter onto the bed and leaned forward, elbows on my knees, heart pounding like a hammer on hollow wood. My whole life, every photo, every Christmas, every conversation about who I looked, like rewrote itself in seconds. The memories didn't disappear. They just changed shape. Dean teaching me to throw a football, Claire's overprotectiveness, Walter's distance. All of it made sense now, and none of it did. When I came back downstairs, no one said anything. Claire met my eyes, searching for something in my expression, but I gave her nothing. I sat at the table, ate half a roll, pretended the roast didn't taste like ash in my mouth. The rest of the night passed in quiet performances. Dishes were cleared, chairs pushed in. Dean and his boys left early, citing the weather. Walter went to bed without a word. I waited until the house was still. Then I found my mother standing in the kitchen, rinsing dishes she'd already cleaned. Her hands moved mechanically. Her shoulders were tight. She didn't turn when I stepped inside. "How long have you been waiting for me to find out?" I asked. She flinched like I'd slapped her, turned slowly. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. "I never wanted you to find out like that. But you knew I would." Claire nodded. Eventually. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed to keep them from shaking. "Why? Why lie to me my whole life?" Her voice cracked. "Because I was ashamed. Because I was scared. Because I was 19 and stupid and grieving my mother." "Dean," I said flatly. She winced. "It was one night. We were both lost and drunk. It shouldn't have happened. It didn't mean anything. He didn't even remember at first. But Walter did." Claire's silence was the answer. I stepped back. My chest felt tight. "And he made you lie. He said it would destroy the family. Said no one would believe it was an accident. He gave me a choice, or leave." I looked at her, then really looked. The lines around her eyes. The way her hands trembled as she clutched a dish towel. I wasn't sure if I pitied her or resented her. Maybe both. She stepped forward, reaching for me. But I took a step back. "I'm still your mother," she said softly. "And Dean's still my father," I replied. The weight of those words hung between us like smoke, bitter and hard to breathe. I turned and left the kitchen without another word, the sound of her sob breaking in the quiet behind me. The house was quiet the next morning, wrapped in a strange calm that felt more like resignation than peace. I avoided the kitchen. Claire's voice filtered down the hall once, but she didn't come near my door. Around mid-morning, Walter knocked, one solid rap with his knuckles. No greeting, just, "Come downstairs. We need to talk." He was already in the den when I got there, sitting in his armchair with a mug of black coffee and an old wool sweater stretched tight across his shoulders. The fire had burned down to coals. He didn't look at me when I entered, just gestured to the empty seat across from him. like this was a meeting, not a conversation. "I suppose you've read the letter?" he said. I didn't answer. He didn't wait. "I told your mother it was a mistake to keep it from you," he said, though his voice didn't carry any regret. "But she was young and frightened, and we had already buried your grandmother that week. Our family was fragile." "You made her lie," I said flatly. "I made a choice," he replied. "One that protected you from a scandal you couldn't understand, and your mother from being ostracized by people who would never have forgiven her." He finally looked up at me. His eyes weren't soft. They were sharp and measured, like he was still doing calculations behind them. "I raised you like a grandson. I gave Claire the stability she needed. Dean, well, Dean went along with it, because he was too ashamed to face what he'd done." "And in exchange?" I asked. "Silence?" Walter sipped his coffee. "Security. I paid for your schooling. I helped Claire buy this house. I made sure you had opportunities. You paid to keep me quiet before I ever knew what the secret was. Call it what you want. I call it protecting the family." I stood slowly, the rage in me cold and clean. "You didn't protect us. You built a lie and called it love." Walter didn't flinch. "That lie gave you a better life than the truth would have." I walked to the door, hand on the frame. "Then, maybe the truth deserves its turn." He didn't stop me, just turned back toward the fire, as if everything that needed saying had already been said. I found Dean outside, clearing snow from the driveway with slow, practiced movements. He was wearing the same Carhartt jacket I remembered him in as a kid, the one he used to shovel our walk when Claire worked overtime. The sun was low, light bouncing off the snow in pale gold streaks. He looked up when I stepped outside, stopped mid-shovel. "You know," I said. His breath clouded in the cold. "I've known. Not for certain, but I always had a feeling." I walked closer, hands shoved in my coat pockets. "And you just said nothing?" What was I supposed to say, Ethan? His voice was low, tired. "Hey, surprise. I might be your dad, but I can't be sure. And even if I am, I was blackout drunk, and your mother's brother?" The words hit hard. Hearing it from him made it real, in a way the letter hadn't. "You knew something wasn't right, and you just lived with it?" I asked. He leaned on the shovel. "I didn't know how to make it right. Walter told me it would destroy everything if the truth came out. And maybe he wasn't wrong. I wasn't exactly father material back then. You're not exactly uncle material now." That made him smile, small, rueful. "Fair enough." We stood there a moment, snow crunching under our boots as the wind cut through the silence. "I didn't stay away because I didn't care," he said. "I stayed away because I was afraid if I got too close, I'd say something I couldn't take back. And I thought you deserved better than the truth. Maybe that was cowardly." "It was." He nodded. "I get that. Look, I don't know what happens next. I'm not trying to force anything. If you want me out of your life, say the word. I'll stay gone." I looked at him then. Really looked. He didn't have Walter's coldness. Just a man standing knee-deep in the wreckage of choices he made decades ago, waiting for whatever came next. "And if I don't?" I asked. "Then I'd like to be part of your life. Not as your dad, not, unless you want that. Just as me, Dean. However you'll have me." I didn't answer right away. But I didn't walk away either. And that, maybe, was enough for now. It started with a slammed door and ended in shouting. Josh had overheard Dean and me talking on the porch. I didn't know he was there. No one did. But by the time I walked back inside, his face was pale. His phone already buzzing with texts to Matt, who came barreling down the stairs 2 minutes later. "What the hell is going on?" Matt demanded, standing in the middle of the living room like he owned the truth and everyone else had stolen it. Josh pointed at Dean. "Is it true? That you're what? Ethan's dad?" The silence collapsed like a dam breaking. Claire stepped out of the hallway, eyes wide. Dean dropped into a chair, suddenly looking much older than 48. "It's complicated," he said. No, I said quietly. It's not. It's just been hidden for 28 years. Matt turned to Claire, voice sharp. Did you know? Did you lie to all of us? Claire's lips trembled. I didn't want it this way. I wanted to protect Ethan. I was young. You were our mom's sister, Josh snapped. You made us call him cousin while you were pretending what? That nothing happened? Dean buried his face in his hands. What about you? Matt said, voice hardening as he turned to Walter. You let this happen? Walter looked up from his armchair, unbothered, like we were all just interrupting his evening show. I did what was necessary. You threatened Mom, didn't you? I said. You told her if she told the truth, you'd cut her off. Make her raise me alone. That's what protecting the family meant to you. He didn't deny it. The truth is messy, and no one thanks you for giving it to them. Then, maybe it was never your truth to control, Claire whispered. Josh walked out. Matt followed. Dean sat motionless, Claire weeping silently across the room. I watched Walter stoic, expressionless still, acting like he hadn't just watched a lifetime of lies catch fire around him. The house felt colder now, not because the heat was gone, but because the warmth had been fake all along. A stage set, a script, and the story was unraveling, one word at a time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the dark pressing in around me like it had questions of its own. I kept thinking about birthdays, holidays, scraped knees, late nights when I couldn't sleep as a kid. The stories Claire used to tell me, how I was her miracle baby, how she had raised me on her own, how Dean was just around a lot, because he had free time and liked kids. Except it wasn't that simple. It never had been. I remembered the baseball glove Dean bought me when I was 9. Not for Christmas. Not for my birthday. Just because. I remembered how he showed up at school when I got into a fight. Not Claire. How he was at every science fair, every championship game, even when Claire was working late. He always stood off to the side. Present, but quiet. Never claiming space. Always watching. He wasn't acting like an uncle. He was acting like someone trying to be a father from the shadows. I thought about the time I broke my wrist jumping off the shed roof. Claire was frantic, trying to find the insurance card, crying in the front seat of the car. Dean rode with me in the ambulance. Held my hand the whole way. Didn't say a word. Just squeezed my fingers tight every time the pain flared. At the time, I thought it was just what uncles did. Now I realized he had looked at me that night, the way no one else ever had. Like I was his. The truth reshaped everything. Not just the memories of Dean but of Walter too. The way he kept distance. The way he never praised me, but made sure my college fund was full. The way he called me Ethan, instead of kid or grandson. It wasn't warmth. It was management. Control. I saw it all clearly now. The scaffolding they'd built around me. The quiet guilt in Claire's smile. The pride in Dean's eyes that he tried to hide. The judgment in Walter's voice, disguised as advice. My entire childhood hadn't been a lie, but the foundation had cracks no one wanted me to see. And now that I did, I couldn't unsee them. The attic hadn't changed in years, same creaking floorboards, same mothball scent clinging to the old quilts and cardboard boxes, stacked like forgotten monuments to someone else's life. I hadn't planned to go up there. But sleep was out of reach, and my thoughts had nowhere left to circle, except backward. The light bulb flickered as I pulled the chain. Dust motes spun through the air like ghosts. I started opening boxes at random. Old photo albums, holiday cards, a stack of VHS tapes labeled in Claire's handwriting. Then, tucked beneath a yellowed blanket, I found a battered cedar chest with rusted hinges and a lock that had long since given up. Inside were letters, bundled with twine. Dozens of them. I opened the top one carefully. The paper was soft from age, the ink faded. They were love letters from someone named Thomas. At first, I assumed it was just an old high school boyfriend. But the dates didn't line up. These were from when Claire was 20, right before I was born. The letters were full of plans. Dreams of moving to Chicago, of building a life together, of how proud Thomas was that Claire had finally stood up to her father. Then the tone changed. In the later letters, he begged for a response, apologized for something he didn't understand, said he'd tried calling but her father had told him she'd moved, that she wanted nothing more to do with him. The last one ended with a single sentence. I hope he's worth it, whoever he is. I sat back, heart pounding. Walter had done this. He hadn't just buried a scandal, he'd buried a life Claire had chosen for herself. He'd erased it, just like he tried to erase my truth. And Claire had let him. Or maybe she hadn't had a choice. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was legacy. This was a family built on silence, edited histories, and threats disguised as protection. It wasn't one secret. It was a pattern that ran deeper than anyone wanted to admit. I put the letters back where I found them. Not out of fear, out of respect. Because someday, Claire would need to open that chest again and remember what she gave up. And maybe understand why I couldn't keep playing my part in someone else's script. The next morning I packed before breakfast. No slow goodbyes. No hugs. Just methodical folding, zipping, stacking. I tucked the letter I'd written into an envelope and left it on the kitchen table. One for Claire. One for Dean. None for Walter. Claire saw me from the hallway. Her face tightened, but she didn't speak at first. Just stepped into the kitchen and stared at the envelope like it was ticking. You're leaving, she said. I nodded. I need time. I can't stay here. She reached for my arm, stopped herself. Ethan, I never wanted it to be like this. But it is. She blinked rapidly, lips parted, searching for something that would make this easier. But the words weren't there. We both knew that. I'm not angry, I said. And I wasn't not in the way I expected. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't breaking anything. I just felt hollow. Like the floor had been pulled out from under me, and I was still pretending to stand. I just need space. To decide what's mine. What's real. Dean came in through the back door, eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept either. He looked at the bag by my feet, then the envelope on the table. This about us? It's about everything. He nodded. Didn't try to talk me out of it. That, in its own way, meant more than anything he could have said. Walter never showed. I assumed he was still upstairs, watching the house unravel from a safe distance like he always did. I didn't go looking for him. He'd had enough of my silence. As I stepped out into the snow, Claire followed me to the porch. Will you come back? She asked. I didn't answer right away, just looked out at the white stretch of road, the gray sky, the tree limbs heavy with frost. All right, I said finally. When I'm ready. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe not. I got into the car, turned the key, and drove away from the house that had shaped me, sheltered me, lied to me. Behind me, a letter sat on the kitchen table. Inside it, not accusations, just truth. And one line underlined at the bottom, if we're going to have a future, it has to start with honesty. Boston in January is a cold that sinks deep. The kind that doesn't leave when you come inside, just lingers under your skin like something personal. I buried myself in work-long shifts at the library. Late nights cataloging backlogs no one else wanted to touch. It was easier than thinking. Easier than remembering. I hadn't spoken to Claire or Dean since I left. No calls. No texts. Nothing. Then one day, a letter arrived, real paper. Actual handwriting. The envelope slightly smudged like it had been held too long before mailing. No return address. Just my name in Dean's blocky print. I opened it at the kitchen counter, half expecting a confession, half expecting silence on the page. It was neither. He wrote about the early days. About how he'd visit the playground just to watch me climb the jungle gym, pretending not to care when I fell. About sneaking into school plays, standing in the back row during science fairs, hiding behind excuses. I didn't know how to be what you needed, he wrote. But I never stopped wanting to be. He ended with a simple ask. Can I try now? Even if it's too late. I folded the letter and slid it into a drawer. I didn't know the answer yet. Maybe I still don't. A few days later, Claire called. I let it ring the first time. The second. But by the third, I picked up. Her voice was quiet, hollow. It's your grandfather, she said. Walter. He's sick. It's serious. I didn't say anything. He asked for you, she added, softer. Said he wants to talk. One time. If you're willing. I thought about the attic, about the lies and the leverage and the years of decisions made for me instead of with me. I thought about his voice telling me it was necessary. And then I thought about how sick people talk differently. How, sometimes, the end makes them honest in ways life never could. All right, I said. I'll come. I hung up before she could say thank you. That night, I packed a small bag. Just essentials. And one photo I hadn't looked at in years, tucked between the pages of an old book. A photo of me at 5 years old, sitting on Dean's shoulders. Both of us laughing in the sun. I didn't know yet what I was going to say. Maybe nothing at all. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and surrender. I signed in at the front desk and followed the nurse down a hall that felt too bright for the kind of conversations waiting behind the doors. Room 218. Walter was alone, propped up in a reclining bed. His skin pale and thin, like wax paper, stretched over bone. He looked smaller, not just physically, like the years had finally caught up to the weight he carried and laid it bare. His eyes opened when he heard the door. He didn't smile. Just looked at me the way someone does when they're no longer holding their breath. You came, he said, voice rough and dry. I nodded once, stepping inside. You asked? He coughed into a tissue, weak but stubborn. Didn't think you would. Neither did I. A long silence passed. Machines beeped softly in the background. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed too loudly. Walter shifted in his bed and reached for a glass of water he couldn't quite lift. I handed it to him without a word. He sipped, then set it down. I ruined things, he said finally. Meant to protect. But I hurt everyone instead. I didn't respond. I told Claire what to do. I told Dean to stay quiet. I told myself it was all for you. But it wasn't. It was for control. I didn't want the shame. Didn't want the whispers. So I buried it. He looked up at me, eyes wet but steady. I watched you grow up thinking I was your grandfather. But I wasn't even that. I was the man who kept you from knowing who you really were. He coughed again. A deep, rattling sound. Do you hate me? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the photograph. The one of Dean and Messenlight. Laughter. A truth that had been hidden in plain sight all along. I walked to the bedside and set it on the tray in front of him. Walter stared at it for a long time. His hand trembled as he reached toward it, but didn't touch it. I remember that day, he whispered. Dean took you to the lake. You came home muddy and happy. Claire was furious. I said nothing, just turned toward the door. Ethan, he said, his voice cracking. Can you forgive me? I paused at the threshold, one hand on the frame. I didn't turn back. I didn't speak. I just left. Spring came late to Boston, but when it did, it was quiet and sure. The kind of season that didn't announce itself, just slipped in while no one was looking, buds on branches. A little warmth in the breeze. The Charles thawing into slow-moving glass. I'd moved apartments since winter. Closer to the river. Higher ceilings. More light. Dean's train arrived just after noon on a Saturday. I met him at South Station. No handshake, no hug. Just a nod and a quiet, hey. He looked older, but lighter. Somehow like guilt had been sanded down into something dull and manageable. We didn't say much as we walked. The city hummed around us. And that was enough. We found a small cafe near Cambridge and sat by the window. He ordered black coffee. I got tea. We talked about neutral things at first this work. My job. The weather. A Red Sox game neither of us watched. Then the conversation slowed and deepened. I don't expect anything, Dean said. I know how much I missed. And I know I don't have the right to ask for anything now. I stirred my tea. I'm not looking for a father. That's not what this is. He nodded. I wouldn't know how to be one anyway. We sat in silence for a moment. The kind that isn't uncomfortable, just honest. Then I looked at him, really looked. But maybe we can just be people. See what's left when all the lies are gone. He smiled. Not big, but real. I'd like that. We walked along the Charles after. Slow steps. The river moved beside us, steady and indifferent, like it always had somewhere to go but no rush to get there. Trees were starting to bud, and couples passed us with dogs and strollers, laughter drifting on the wind. I thought about the attic, the letter, the hospital. I thought about how everything I believed about my family had cracked open like ice in spring, and how I hadn't drowned. I just had to learn how to swim in colder water. The truth had broken something in me, but it had also unshackled it. For the first time in my life, no one was scripting the story for me. There was no grand narrative to uphold, no legacy to protect. There was just this moment, this air, this river, and the quiet certainty that whatever came next, it would be mine. This story was brutal. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.